Let's rock and roll. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I'm your host of these TechTonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts that we've been producing to bring to you interesting topics around enterprise tech, tech leadership, tech entrepreneurship. Today, I have a special guest joining us all the way from Ireland, Kevin Mannion. Kevin, greetings and thank you very much for your time.
Great to speak to you again, Ivor, all the way here from sunny Ireland.
From
Looking forward to having a good conversation today.
from sunny Ireland all over to the, well, equally sunny Canada. Lovely to have you, Kevin. Kevin, Kevin and I actually met online through LinkedIn conversations and my sort of musings on the evolution of consulting as an industry. And then Kevin reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think I have something that might be of interest." And we had a conversation. Kevin showed me what he's working on, and I was like, "Man, this is the prime example of this disruption we are talking about." As a matter of fact, what Kevin is doing is creating a product that is going to be helpful to consultants to, I think, significantly improve effectiveness and efficiency of their work, of our work being consultants. So I'm very much looking forward to hear more, Kevin, about the story. I do not introduce my guests because that would be doing them this service. Instead, I much prefer my guests to introduce themselves. So maybe, Kevin, we start with you telling us a little bit about who you are and
Yeah,
your story, and then we'll get to
we'll get
how
to the
you
product.
got to.
But I'm reminded of our first conversation where you told me that you wanted to be the first. I'm probably underdoing the revenue, but the first multi-million-dollar consulting sole proprietor of the consulting business. And I said, I'll see if we can help you get there.
That's the plan. That's the plan. Yes, exactly. So, Kevin,
Uh,
tell us a little bit
yeah.
of sort of who you are and how you navigated your life and career, and then how you came up to this with this particular concept.
Yeah, well, Diver, love to talk to you again. Kevin Mannion, hi everyone. I'm founder of a company called Workstuff.AI. We're an AI platform for consulting and professional services firms. I'll tell you how I got here, a long journey. I started my own career in Accenture, doing management consulting, technology consulting here in Dublin, Ireland. Worked mainly on public sector projects for about 8 years. I spent some of that time in Australia as well with Accenture, the Australian tax office. And I left the world of consulting 2011 or 12 or so and went into the world of software companies like tech companies and spent the last 15 years almost scaling startups and tech companies. I spent some of that time here in Dublin and some of that time in San Francisco. So it's about 5 years or so in Silicon Valley. Um, I started the journey of work stuff about a year ago. I could see I was actually doing a role that was like an internal consultant. That's what I was doing. I was the chief of staff at a quite large organization,
Yeah.
and I could see a few things that were happening in the world. And like the biggest one for me was in that role, I found it so difficult. We used to do a lot of like strategy, and I always found it easy to make a strategy to like go away in a small group and come back with three
Great
new
ideas.
pillars.
Yeah.
Yeah, three new pillars for the company. But activating the strategy was always really challenging, and
Yeah.
I just felt that like organizations are just becoming so more complex. Um, Events and changes were happening so rapidly in businesses, and there was no real easy way for us to take a strategy and activate that across 200, 500, 500, 500, 1,000 people. It really
Yeah.
was making that there was just no easy way to do it.
Yeah.
And the second part of it was I just started becoming fascinated with the world of AI. My own background had been technical, I guess,
Yeah.
way back in the day, and then I'd become more commercial and kind of flip flopped around. And I guess I just saw a big opportunity to take some of these challenges where we were dealing with maybe the opinions of 1,000 people that we couldn't really synthesize into any sort of process in the old world. But I just saw a lot of opportunity for how AI could play a role in solving more complex problems in organizations And I just became fascinated by the potential there.
Yeah.
And obviously, lots of barriers and hallucinations and everything to figure out, but the core potential seemed to be there to solve some of those really gray, fuzzy problems that we had in our organization.
Yeah.
So I started a business, and initially I wasn't sure whether this was going to be an internal strategy type tool thing
Yeah.
or something for consultants. But the more consultants I talked to, the more the problem became kind of clearer and a little broader. And I
Hmm.
realized that they essentially had maybe two or three problems that were overlapping. And that's kind of what's drawn or how the solution has evolved over the last while.
Okay.
Um, they had those standard problems like, well, how do we get a strategy to really work in an organization? How do we align stakeholders, whether they're senior stakeholders or they're broad range of stakeholders, like change management type exercises. But also they were like, okay, AI exists. We need some AI. We need to demonstrate some use of AI to our own clients because we're telling them that we're experts in AI. We are playing around with it here. We're playing around with like off the shelf tools. It's hard for us to take those off the shelf tools and do anything meaningful for the clients with those tools. Um, so, like, what are we going to do? And that was maybe a second problem. And then I guess there was this third problem, which was okay, there's kind of no barriers anymore to starting any sort of business. You
That's
can
true.
kind of talk your way, become whatever you want to become. But how do you keep those customers? And a thing that kept popping up was how can we be clearer to our clients around the impact that we're making if our clients all of a sudden have the option to use lots of technology and AI that may potentially replace us someday?
Yeah.
How can we be clearer that if we walk in the door on Monday and we walk out in 3 months' time or 3 years' time, how can we be clear on what we've actually done here and the value that we've brought to the business?
And in the way
So
that the client is going to actually appreciate, understand, recognize.
and make them look good also too. They're obviously getting budget from somewhere else. So appreciate, understand, recognize, and utilize themselves in terms of showing their own value within their organizations.
Yeah.
So no, that was a long answer, Dalibor, but that's
It
what
it
that's what
look,
got
it's
us.
a great and it's a good first of all the identification of the problem and the need I think that you've done is very real.
Mm,
Uh, I've spent 30 years in consulting industry, and I understand how the business model works. And essentially, for all consulting industry, very much like all professional services businesses, the pyramidal structure is the business model, right? And what we are seeing now is the frontal attack on the base of the pyramid that is being chewed up through technology, but also, quite frankly, through other things. The client's expectations are rising, the time to value is shrinking, right? So the industry itself is facing significant challenges. So the tool like yours, what we're going to see in few minutes, is both the answer to the problem and is amplifying the problem, which is really interesting, right? It's amplifying and providing a solution at the same time. And it'll be really interesting to see how consultants like me and others would actually be able to leverage a tool like yours so that are um, we are better off, that we become
yeah,
that we improve the services we deliver in a dramatically improved cost and time efficiency.
yeah, yeah. And like I suppose one thing I think about on that topic is that you know the there is an assumption. One of the things that we've tried to focus on a lot is improving the client experience.
Hmm.
Um, because I think the client knows that you're doing something. They know that like they're going to price and see the value of your services with the assumption that you already have a set of AI tools, whether it's ChatGPT or
True.
Copilot. They're already assuming that you've baked in this. They think you have the margin. The challenge is, the challenge is a lot of time you haven't figured out how to generate that margin.
True.
And so one of the things that we've tried to focus on, um, a lot is how can you use this not just to generate this, efficiency, this 20, kind of 20%, 30% efficiency that people say that you can have, but also how can you make it a better experience for the client so that they're not thinking about how you're doing it. They're just thinking this is way better an
Yeah.
experience for us
Yes.
than we had 2 years ago, the last time we did a strategy activation or a review of our systems or we implemented a new system. So that's something that yeah. So it's like you said, it's an interesting time, and certain, I guess, firms will have the will create urgency and will try and transform themselves, and some will find that more difficult. So
Mm.
definitely interesting times.
Yep, absolutely. So look, why don't we take a look at the product? First of all, let's take a look at the concept and then
Yeah,
product so that we can demonstrate to our audience what we actually mean when we say, look, we are here disrupting consulting, but also empowering consultants.
okay. And Dalibor, I'll share my screen. So I've got two slides, one slide or two, and then we actually show the product. But
Sure.
don't be afraid to speed me up or slow me down,
Of course, of course.
because I
And
might
for
just.
those who are following us live on this Monday, June the 2nd, if you have any questions or comments, please use Q&A function of the Zoom platform to submit your questions. So, yeah, let's see.
Okay, thank you, Dalibor.
Workstuff.ai. That, by the way,
Yeah,
is a pretty cool name. So,
people get confused. They
right
don't.
on, man. Right on.
Well, it covers a lot of stuff. Yeah, so what we are is an AI platform for consulting and professional services firms. We're not a tool to say use to not need a consultant anymore. We're essentially arming the consultants with technology. That is our mission.
And I think that's
And
just really important. This is really important. So the idea, this is not displacing consultants from the project. This is actually tool that consultants should be using to improve the way they construct and deliver the project. And as we will see in a moment, to scale the project out in a way that would not be possible otherwise, or would be possible but at extreme amount of effort and investment, right?
yeah, you got it. Yeah, and we have the three things, which is my one slide. One is selling more stuff. The second is doing a much faster, better job at understanding the needs of a business. That's the discovery agent. And the third is what we call the impact agent, which is proving the value of the work that you're doing. I'll just talk to each one, and we'll actually show a real life example. The
Yep.
concept behind the proposal agent is it's a tool that's listening to your sales calls or your business development calls as you're talking to a prospect, or as you're going through a series of conversations with stakeholders. It's extracting the pains the client has out of those calls, or the prospect has out of those calls. And then it's mapping that against the capabilities in your business, and it's generating a assessment or business case proposal for the client. Now, right now, this isn't exactly the typical maybe 40 slides of resumes in the back, RFP response type of thing. This is more for when you're essentially turning their challenges into a business case.
Into an opportunity. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, a,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a essentially a smart way to do that. And it's collaborative. So after you've had your maybe you talk initially to a CEO and they say, okay, go away and talk to my CFO and my CTO and my head of marketing. You go off and you have those conversations. Essentially, it aggregates everything you learned from those calls back onto a single page business case that you can then walk through with the CFO or the CEO in order to get essentially a green light for an
Mm.
initial engagement.
Excellent. So it's proposal agent. It will be helpful to the internal teams as it summarizes and articulates the opportunity it learned from multiple client stakeholders. But I'm going to suggest it also, like if you let me actually ask you, you can also interview people within your own organization who might understand the client and understand what you're
Yeah.
offering. So in case of actual RFP response moment, right? So you can what you're describing, your example is you're already in the client organization. You're talking with the CEO who has said, go and talk to my team. You are talking to it. So it's really an opportunity identifier and summarizer, as well as the actual proposal uh,
Creation.
creator or
Yeah,
yeah. And obviously, like you just mentioned, you've been with Accenture for many years. I have been with another large
yeah,
firm. We all recognize how much time, effort, and money goes
yeah,
into preparation of the actual proposals, right? That's a major effort, right?
yeah. The senior people as well, expensive, kind of best
Absolutely.
or the most expensive people. I suppose one point before I go into all of these is that each one of these is highly configurable. So the one thing that we're trying to maintain is that the brand of the firm. So whether it's the brand of the firm or your brand, your methodology, the way you might run a particular process, these are the types of things that are configurable on the
Right.
platform
Right.
and not something that we want to define to be the same for everybody.
So
Ultimately,
in
what we
other
want to
words,
do,
so what you're really saying is that so hence you calling it a platform because
yeah,
you're bringing the set of capabilities. This is all hosted online on the platform, but the actual details and flow and is all configurable by individual clients, right? That you have the individual consulting organizations that are using your software in a multi-tenant
yes,
setup, right?
yeah. So you can have it, yeah, obviously per firm branding, and then per client also. You can have
And for the
essentially a
client too.
per client. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool actually. So you can do, yeah, okay, I see, I see. So your platform is relevant in preparation for the project. That's the proposal agent.
Yes. So
Then this,
what's let's okay. So now we're in. We've sold the deal, and we can show this for real in a moment. But one of the first things you might need to do is like current needs assessment in an organization. And typically, what you might do is you don't have an infinite amount of time. So you're going to spend maybe as much time doing that as you can afford to do. So maybe you've got like 2 weeks. Maybe you end up tracking down 5 managers. You talk to them about the problems in the business, and then you build your thesis from there.
yeah.
The goal behind Discovery Agent is to essentially be able to reach 100 or 1,000 stakeholders in that same amount of time.
Or
So,
10,000 or
or 10,000.
100,000.
Or 10,000 or 100,000. Absolutely, yeah. So essentially what we've built is an AI stakeholder interviewer so that you can essentially give this agent a learning goal. It might be as simple as what are the needs or pains in the business? It might be something like, let's go ask the customer support team what they're hearing from our customers on the front line. Or it could be, let's go and ask our developers about like how hard it is to ship code. What's our developer experience like? Whatever your expertise is,
Yeah.
you can give the agent the goal of learning that. And essentially, then you invite these stakeholders on the platform. You put communications around it so they know that they're giving input into a strategic initiative for the business. Essentially, they go through. We'll demonstrate in a moment. Essentially, a voice-based interview
Yep.
where they're asked particular questions. They respond in voice, and it's just really good at capturing and synthesizing a lot of stakeholder information
Yep.
and giving that to you as the consultant back. Here um, a lot of information about the business that would otherwise take you a long time to collect.
Yep.
Essentially, all collected, documented, maybe in a matter of a couple of days, as opposed to something that could be a couple of months.
Yep. Yep.
We'll show it in a moment, but I'll touch on the last piece of the jigsaw, which is the impact agent. And essentially, what the impact like it's sometimes very hard for consultants when someone puts a gun to their head to say what value have you created in this organization. It actually is a very hard question to answer sometimes. Um, so what the impact agent does is essentially does a separate round of interviews post project, and you can combine this with other information that you've gathered or quantitative data that you've captured from other systems.
Yeah.
Essentially, what this does is it creates a post project benefits analysis.
Yeah.
where it can combine both the qualitative information, anecdotal information it's heard from people, and also quantitative information, and generate a report that enables you as the partner in the consulting firm to demonstrate your value and the value of your team. Also, maybe pick up some lessons learned and areas for improvement, but also enables the client to have a single view, a helicopter view of all of their projects that they've run through you and the ROI that you've generated from the organization. Um,
So full you actually for the full journey here, for the full you have the platform works from before you actually sell the project, perhaps in the first proposal agent. Then the platform is there to help deliver the project. Then a platform is there to help you assess the impact and articulate the impact of the project after you're done. So it's like the full life cycle is covered.
Full life cycle, yeah. And I suppose, again, the most important thing being that you have the ability to tailor it, customize it. Maybe you've
Yeah,
got a consulting firm that has like three offerings. Maybe you do like data, maybe you do like some sort of SAP transformations, and maybe you do strategy work. So you can create the different offerings on the platform.
yeah,
And it's pretty interactive with you as a consultant. So you will see now from the demo, like the consultant is always, let's say, in the human is always in the loop in terms of validating, seeing, being able to deep dive.
yeah,
The software is doing the heavy lifting.
yeah. So, Kevin, for our audiences, what we are going to see next, and now, of course, we did a little bit of a prep before we started, so I know kind of the two examples we're going to have, but we're going to effectively go through two examples of how the tool can be helpful. One example is going to be sort of very general and something that is pretty easy to understand because every single consulting engagement will go through this particular phase. And then another example, a little bit more detailed and more maybe customized, but just to show that demonstrate sort of the power of the tool, right?
Yeah, I'll bring that up now. So can you
All
see
right.
the tool itself now, Dalibor? Just make sure that I'm
Yeah,
sharing
yeah,
the right
I see.
one.
Yeah, I see the screen. I see
Okay.
this. So this what we're looking at is the interface, is the user
Yeah.
interface of the tool, right?
Yeah. So this is the generic branding. So obviously you can change fonts, colors, logos, etc. So you can fully brand this as your own transformation platform or your own consulting platform. So essentially
Mhm.
it comes as a white label solution. This is our kind of generic branding, but yeah, this is the tool in action.
Mhm.
So software as a service. So it's hosted on the cloud, and you get your account, and you're up and running.
Yeah.
So in this example, it's a pretty basic example. It's a current state assessment in an organization.
Okay.
As we spoke about, one of the early phases of almost every consulting gig is to understand what the as is in an organization in terms of how people work, what the challenges are, where you can add value.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you might be coming in with certain expertise, but in this scenario here, it's pretty generic.
Yeah. So maybe what I'll do is just maybe say in general, every single consulting engagement, advisory type engagement, essentially you can boil down to four steps. Like step one would be to understand the current state. Like as you enter into an organization, regardless of what the ask is, step number one is to really understand what's going on, who is who, and try to sort of figure out what is the root cause of an issue. That's sort of always step like number one. Step number two is definition of the target state. So we can imagine a better future, right? That's step two in every engagement. Step three would be then to figure out the gap. That's the gap assessment, a gap analysis, from which you would actually draw a set of recommendations and roadmap. That would be the step four, right? So these are the typical steps in consulting engagement. And of course, you and I were both in our consultants. We know like it is superbly important to get this right, to get the current state right. But there is limited time and
Yes.
money available for like that's the limitation, right? If you could have endless amount of money and time, you could go and interview every single person in an organization and every one of their clients and every one of their suppliers and every one of their shareholders and stakeholders, and you could get perfectly accurate information of the current state if there was no, you know, money
Limited,
and
yeah.
time
Great.
restriction.
Yeah.
But
And
we
the
live
reality,
in the real world, right?
and some real world is some people are not paid for this work. You know, sometimes people are coming in and trying to do these types of initial assessments, and they're doing it as a proof of their value. Now, not a great place to be in, but like it's pretty common. So anything that we can make this better, either from both a quality perspective and also a cost to the consultant,
Yeah.
is really valuable. And the more you can do, the more projects you can do, etc.
So exactly. So
That's
now
what happens.
let's see what your product actually does.
Yeah. All right. So in this scenario here, instead of talking to the 5 or 10 managers to understand the challenges in the business, we're going to talk to everybody. Think of it could be a customer service, contact center, could be a developer team. But we start off by defining essentially 6 questions. Now this is the basic examples. These are like basic questions. They're written here. We ask someone to walk me through your typical day. What are your responsibilities? You know, what do you consider the biggest time drains that prevent you from getting your responsibilities done? What administrative or low value activities do you find yourself getting caught up in? And because this example here is for like an AI consultant, they're saying, what ways have you incorporated AI into your work
Yeah,
processes voluntarily, and where do you see untapped opportunities? So this is like a chat you might have if you were walking the halls, sitting down with people, grabbing 20 minutes.
exactly.
We load them up here. So these people are essentially invited onto the platform. Maybe you run a workshop before or after, or you're doing something to make them feel part of the overall process. The way it works in the system is you end up with these voice-based interviews where the stakeholder is asked a question in text and they respond in voice.
So
We
just
treat
go a second. So what you did is these 6 questions are obviously customizable questions. Those are the same questions that you would ask in a normal consulting engagement as part of your current state assessment, right? So
Yes,
in other words, me as a consultant using your platform, instead of asking the 6 questions of my client in person, the questions will be uploaded as you just shown, and then a link gets created, and you can send that link to however many clients are across the organization. Not no longer
yeah,
limited
exactly.
to 5 managers. You can now send the link to. You can still have your interview with 5 managers, but in addition to that, you can have N is potentially
Uh,
everybody.
yeah, so it could be hundreds, could be 1,000 people.
Yeah,
And maybe it's like, sometimes it's like hybrid. So maybe it's like we've got a workshop at the end of the week. We want to prioritize some of these issues, but in advance, we'd love to do some discovery asynchronously with everybody on this large team, so that we can focus in on the most common and most
yeah.
most biggest challenges.
So now what we see here is out of those 6 questions that you shown 2 minutes ago, you now clicked on the link. This is kind of what will be exposed to a client, and they will get this on their phone or on their computer when they click the link. They will get those 6 questions, and now we're looking at question 3 out of 6. For those who might be listening to this as a podcast and not viewing the screen, so we are now in this process, we are now in a question 3 out of 6. What would you consider to be the biggest time drains that prevent you from getting those core responsibilities done, right?
Yeah.
So
So I'll just answer here. All I do is I click record and I just start talking. So I'll come up with a hypothetical answer. So I suppose the biggest time drains for me is we have just so much manual data entry. The system doesn't seem to remember anything we put in the time before. So every time we have to create a new record, there's like 10 fields that need to be filled out, and it's very repetitive. And I just spend all day doing this type of stuff. I guess the other problem is that we've got multiple systems. Like we've a different system in Europe than in the US. So sometimes I have to decide which system to put entries into, and sometimes I don't even know myself, so I have to do it twice. So like that's really confusing. And I suppose the last bit is we work with a team. We're based here in Toronto, but we work with a team in India. And like while that means we can work for 24 hours a day, sometimes I might have to wait till the very end of my day to get in touch with somebody over there on some piece of information that I need. So like that can just like waste my entire day. So I guess those are some of the things that are my time drains at least. Hopefully this
So
understands
you
how.
have just now answered the question, and
Yes.
after you finished answering the question, you click done,
Yes.
and voila! Look at that. Let's see.
Let's
So
see.
here is the
So
read it. Do you mind like just read us the response?
yeah, let's see if it got what it got. So it says so just for background, what it's doing is it's tidying up what I say, because that enables me to kind of you know blab on a bit, but it will always then make that a little bit tidier and cleaner. So it says identified several significant time drains that hinder my ability to complete core responsibilities. First, there's a lot of manual data entry involved as our systems fail to retain previously entered information. This means I repeatedly fill out 10 fields each time I create a new record, which is tedious and takes up much of my day.
Yep.
Additionally, we have multiple systems. For instance, the system in Europe differs from the one in the US, which often leaves me uncertain about where to enter data, leading to potential double entries. And last, while our team in Toronto has the benefit of collaborating with colleagues in India around the clock, I sometimes find myself waiting until the end of my workday to get the necessary information from them, which can be very frustrating and time consuming. Overall, these factors significantly drain my time.
Excellent. So
Pretty good.
not only is it accurate, but it is actually stated in a concise professional language already. Right?
Yeah, more
You
professional than I am able to verbalize. So it's
correct.
definitely tidy things up.
And
Um,
when you click confirm, so now you are a user, you just said this, the system actually summarized it and played it back to you. You just read it, and if you are happy, you click
you click
done,
OK.
and you
It will
move on to the
exercise.
next one.
Yeah, and it's actually done a follow up here. We won't go through with it, but it's decided it's decided on this case to do a follow up to say just give me one example. And there's a reason for that, which we'll get to in the summary. Is that we've asked this agent in this scenario to like probe for examples and quantity of time because we want to be able to create like sum those up and make it really visceral and real for the sponsors what the challenges are in the business.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Okay. Now it takes about 8 minutes typically to do 6 questions. So I suppose we spent a bit of time talking back and forth, but the whole goal is to just reduce the barriers and make it and capture a richer set of information.
Yeah.
Now what I'll do is I'll go back to kind of where we started, which was where we defined the questions. There's 10 responses here, there could be 1,000. But if I click on insights, I'm getting this like wall of words and I'm starting to see like I'm a consultant. I'm back in consultant mode now. I'm starting to see what the challenges are in the business. And this one popping up red cross departmental communication challenges. I might be curious. Okay, what's the story there? I can click on that,
Let's click on
and I
that.
can
Yeah.
see some quotes. Fragmented communication, coordinated, often leads to miscommunications and redundant discussion. So I can see a set of quotes, and I can see Chloe and Brian seem to emphasize this one a lot. So I can kind of it's given me the root of some of the insights that it's created. It said, here's some quotes that are relevant that have driven this like negative sentiment. And I can read all the transcripts. I can read the summary level. I can kind of go as deep as I want, or I can keep it at surface level. And
Yeah.
obviously, if it's 10 senior people, you're probably going to read the transcripts. If it's 1,000 people, you're not going to have the ability to do that. So you're going to work
Well,
off
if you were
things
to read all the transcripts,
equally.
exactly that would defeat the purpose. The point here,
Yeah,
I think. So the idea here is essentially, I love what you said. You can do the hybrid. In other words, if you are entering a large organization and you're working with a C-suite leader, and you're now embarking on the current state assessment, you need to interview multiple people. Typically, you are right. Typically, this would be a couple of weeks of engagement, and you would be able to talk about it. Maybe a dozen people, 2,000 people. This now allows you to actually survey as many as you want. Like there's limit is just the size of the organization, I guess. Well, obviously. So you can still go and survey senior people in person, not use the tool, right? But you
Yeah,
can
or
also survey them in person and record the conversation.
exactly. So you can literally add a new contribution here, and you can add a Zoom link, and it will join the call. And if the person is so important that you want to do it face to face, you just have that face to face, and it will extract the same answers to these questions. You can follow the questions if you want, or you can have a more unstructured conversation, but it essentially will extract from the call record what you've learned and consolidate that with all of the people who've gone through the voice interview.
Yeah, yeah, pretty cool.
And,
Pretty damn
and the
cool.
last bit is it's generated a report. So we've got our 10 responses, 10,000, whichever. It's generated a one-page kind of summary of what it's learned. My favorite part of this is it's got a summary of the various time drains, and it's also got a productivity analysis. So it's essentially made a calculation that we're as a this group is losing, I think, 800 hours monthly as a result of these low value activities. And that's why it's asking those probing questions so it can start to quantify some of this stuff. So now we're walking back not just with an understanding of the needs of the business, we're actually walking back with essentially a business case to the CFO. Maybe this is just a phase one, and we can say, look, we think if we move now into phase two, there's maybe 400 hours that we can recover in terms of productivity. Here is the proof and the evidence of where that productivity is being lost at the moment, and maybe here is how we can address it. Here's the potential recovery analysis, so we can get you back 600 hours of that. So this is the type of thing that you can create your own templates and calculations that match the type of work that you do. So the
Yeah.
platform itself is flexible in how it
But
does this.
this is fantastic. Excellent, excellent. So we have a couple of questions from the
Yeah.
audience. Kevin is asking, do you ask people to verify that they read the text from their verbal response? I guess before they click confirm.
Yeah, you can add custom instructions, let's say. So and that's kind of I would say firm specific. So some people might say make sure and read the result for accuracy, or someone might say, or you might just say, no, let's use that space to encourage them to like maybe give me 2 minutes of audio. So you can definitely decide yourself where you want to call their attention to, whether it is like you say verifying the accuracy or whether it is to prompt them with thought starters or maybe ideas or prompts. So
Mm.
you can add,
Yeah.
a short answer, you can add prompts for that
And
kind of stuff.
And as I mentioned in the invitation to this call, when I saw your product, I am a customer. So I signed up. So when you use the product, this is my sort of experience. Um, yes, when you answer a question, it will summarize it, and you will see the summarization as someone who was just interviewed by the system. You will see the summarization. You can edit that if you want, or keep it as it was. In the example that we shown, Kevin, you've stated your sample response. The system captured it, articulated it, presented it to you. You read it, and then you clicked confirm, meaning you accept this properly captures what I wanted to say. In other words, confirm. If you wanted to clarify, you could actually edit that text, if I recall correctly, and then confirm. Correct?
And some people will do that. Some people will just start writing more information because they want to just they thought of something else or whatever that is. So you've
Yeah.
got some
Very
flexibility
good.
to do it.
Thanks for the question, Kevin. This was excellent question. Thank you. All righty. So,
What's another?
so Kevin, there was
Yeah.
another example that you wanted to show, right? A little bit more complex, a little bit more.
Yes.
Let's
Um,
let's see that.
hopefully people are following along. So a pretty typical thing you might do as a consultant is something like a maturity assessment or health check.
Yep.
Various things. You essentially a lot of the time, what's happening here is you're coming into an organization. Maybe you're being paid. Maybe it's a kind of introductory thing where you're coming in. You're trying to assess how strong a client is in a set of areas, so that you can highlight maybe what their gaps are
Yep.
and where you can help, and more of this type of building the business case. This example here is it's like a data it's for a consultancy that like does data science. So it's more complex, say, than some of the more basic current state assessment. But ultimately, they're coming into a business. They're trying to understand how a business uses data, what value they could potentially bring as a consultant to help them maybe use more, maybe implement more complex dashboards, or maybe a new platform, whatever that might be. And as part of their sales process, let's call it, they do a maturity analysis. Now, the way this works is, again, you're defining a set of questions, high level questions. How is data stored across your business? What problems do your teams face when trying to use data for decisions? How do you ensure your data is accurate? What important business question can't you answer despite having the data somewhere? So a set of questions. Again, you typically would have this now set up in a template so
Yep.
that every new prospect you're going into, there's a kind of out of the box discovery that you're doing on them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in order to answer those questions, you can either send the link where they do it themselves on the phone asynchronously, or like we showed before, you can just do this part of your sales process. So you can just add it to your team's call. You can directly add this health check to your team's call as you're talking. Maybe you're talking to head of marketing, their various business owners, various analysts in the business. You can have different questions for different people, but we'll keep it simple for now. What we've also defined on the platform in your templates is what we call a maturity model. So
This is
ultimately,
cool. This is gold.
what does and this is like, what does good and bad look like? What's a one and what's a five? For
Yep.
various types of, let's call them factors that would determine how mature you are and how you use data. Some of
So
this is
not
around.
so just a point here. Sorry, Kevin. Obviously, this is all customizable, right?
Mm,
Right.
yes.
So can you customize the
Oh
number
yeah.
of items that you go? So in other words, if like the consultants live in maturity models from CMMI to ITIL to COBIT to like maturity models abound, and many consultancies actually use industry standard maturity models.
Yeah.
What I'm going with this is you can actually create a template for any number of pre-existing maturity models that you are actually using as part of your business, or you can create your own
Yes. Yeah,
custom.
exactly. And you can have it simple, you can have it complicated.
Yep.
Um, and a lot of the time, there probably is a trend towards simplification. Like a lot of the time, the current thing a consultant would use today would be a spreadsheet that
Yeah.
has, 200 rows,
Yeah.
and they literally go through every question with the client, one to five, one to five,
Yes.
one to five. So obviously we're trying to just make it a little bit more user friendly, let's say interactive, etc. So we have, what have we done? We've set some questions. We've set up the maturity model. In this scenario here, we've got a good few responses. I think it might be 19 responses in this scenario here. Some of these were captured via Teams calls. Some of them were on the link.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but also, ultimately, what's happening here is it's listening to the calls or seeing the answers. And then based on those for each person, it's running the scoring against the maturity model. And essentially what it gives you then is this organizational wide maturity model
There we go.
for how you stack up or how the client stacks up across what you've defined.
Yeah.
Now you can do a few things with this. You can override this. You are the consultant. You are on the calls. If you want to make a gap bigger or larger
Yeah.
or not, you can set the benchmarks. You might say, look, let's just reduce the target on some of these, and like let's just focus on getting them up to speed in one or two particular areas. This is what's within your power as the consultant, is that last mile of storytelling. But all behind this, you essentially have like all the reasons, the factors, like
Yeah.
what got you to the score, and essentially what you end up doing is creating a similar memo, which is shareable with the client, which says, "Hey, here's everyone we talked to. Here's a summary. Here's where we think you stand. Here's the current state and future state for each of those areas. Here's like a relevant quote from a stakeholder along the way." And here is like a 90-day action plan that we
Incredible.
recommend as a
As a matter of
result.
fact, as a matter of fact, just like we said, the initial demo that you showed us was about current state assessment, which is typically phase one of every engagement. This here actually is part of the phase two and phase three of every engagement, because through maturity model, you actually are capable to define what the target state ought to be. And then through this analysis, you're actually surfacing potential gaps. So
Yeah,
this here is an example of how the tool is useful for phase two and three, actually, and four of the advisory project or advisory engagement, right?
absolutely. And there's two ways of looking at it. It can be phase two, three, and four, or it can be a quick phase zero if you're trying to
Yeah,
if you're trying to
that
sell it. That's
that's
kind of
right.
how you utilize it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So and there's obviously, a lot more you can do on this in terms of different types of um, analysis and models, etc. But like, I think this is a good representation of real world types of use cases that clients will be bringing to their or our
very good.
customers will be our clients on a daily basis.
Very good, very good. Like, look, I mean, people have heard, obviously, AI is coming to disrupt professional services and disrupt consulting, and like it feels intuitively, yes, we are going through a massive disruption and transition of all white collar work, right? But people are calling out specifically, management consulting will be clearly impacted, and so will be, accounting, and so will be law. Well, I wanted to bring that philosophical discussion down to earth and
Mm,
showcase what does this actually mean in practice. So
mm.
to me, your product is that. Here is what it means in practice. Here is how we can, you know, take what would normally be a 3 week effort of 10 people and turn it into a 1 day effort by one person who needs to analyze the results of all these interviews. Like, this is the way to tremendously accelerate and quite frankly extend the reach of your
Mm.
consulting
Yeah,
engagement, right? I wanted to showcase this. I thought your product is so elegant, simple, and right on, right?
yeah. Thank
We
you.
have another. If you have, we have another question from the audience.
Oh,
Karen is asking, how can the system read between the lines, as in capture the nuisance that human being might be able to assess? The
yeah.
body language, the pause between answers, the emotion of the answer. It's Karen. This was an excellent question. So, Kevin, how would you answer that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it was actually a point I was going to make is like this is for me, this illustrates like the changing skill set for the consultant. So I'll directly answer the question first. So obviously, if you're doing pure voice interviews, you're not in the room, so you don't have the ability to make those, let's call them, nuanced assessments. What you do have is just a lot more information, a lot more information coming back. So, like, let's call it like a broader understanding of the challenges within the organization. The way we maybe accommodate that part of it is you end of the day you can still do all of this stuff face to face. So you can set up one of these interviews and you can do it on Teams. So you can go back into manual mode. Maybe for some people, maybe there's some tricky stakeholders, you can do it that way. You can literally go and meet them for a cup of coffee, and you can record the conversation here, and it will also extract the information from that conversation. Um, and you, I guess, can use it in parallel with maybe a set of workshops. So um, it it doesn't stop you from having that human touch and utilizing those kind of skills, human skills, let's call them. But it definitely provides you with a lot more information, maybe going into one of those conversations if you've maybe done a
Yeah.
pre-assessment with this. So the AI itself, say for example, isn't like reading body language. It's not doing in the future, right? We'll see what happens, but
Yeah.
it's essentially a tool to get a lot maybe more information and then free up your time to go and maybe tackle face to face some of the even more challenging stakeholders or more senior people or people that you want to really understand.
So now, we were discussing this as a tool for professional services. That is clear. I mean, it's clear. Like, but if you think about it, internal companies could absolutely leverage a tool like this for their own
Mm,
purposes, right? I am like what comes to my mind, an obvious use case here would be an employee engagement conversation, right? If you are head of HR, for example, for a big multinational company, you could have your employee engagement surveys done instead of the way they're currently done through like a survey tool. You can actually expose that and have a an actual conversation with an employee who can talk about their preferences, their challenges, and so on and so forth. I think this would make it much more elegant and much more. It will feel more neutral, more natural. I think.
yeah.
So
Oh,
the
like
use
that.
cases can be the use cases are not just for professional services and consultants. This could be absolutely superbly useful tool internally for the organizations,
Oh,
right?
big time, yeah. Obviously, yeah. Like, obviously, I think we're kind of aligned with the consulting industry in terms of, there's a bit of my own history there and passion around that. But yeah, obviously the tool itself in the right hands. And like on the employee stuff, we would have a number of consultants that do employee experience that are essentially able to bring bespoke kind of solutions to their clients to say, look, you got your engagement
Yeah.
survey, the score went up, 0.22, you've gone from 81% engagement to 82% engagement. You don't really know why. Let's use this to do a deep dive on
Yeah.
certain topics and let's get to the root cause. So yeah, it's definitely a big area.
And so, Kevin, thank you very much for sharing this. I think it's really,
Hmm.
really neat and cool, and I think it was really worth to show to people
Yeah,
who are asking, like, give me an example of AI entering into the field and
yeah,
being practically helpful. Do you have any thoughts of like where do you see the progression and evolution of the product?
yeah. It's a good question. Like I think two areas. I think one is I just think it just being more of a collaborative experience with the client.
Hmm.
So maybe like scenarios is one area I think is really interesting. So say we do a discovery, and now we want to put in front of the senior sponsors to say, look, you can spend $500,000 with us, you'll probably get this outcome. You can spend $1.2 million with us, you'll get the next outcome, and almost bringing them into that interactive experience of creating a business case. I think there's a lot of kind of upside we can create for consultants doing things like that. Right now, it's almost capture, generate. Yeah, the consultant can edit, and they could even bring the sponsor on a Zoom call and edit together. But I think making that experience more interactive, um, definitely potential for it to be like much more two-way in terms of updates, keeping stakeholders, whether they're senior stakeholders or kind of end users, like up to date, like communications around like what's happening around transformation. So like, hey, we just asked you a load of questions. Here's how that's made an impact on the actual strategy for the business.
Yeah.
So big amount there. And then one other area then I think is like consulting firms have just so much internal inefficiency. There is just like, so much manualized kind of work around
Yeah.
whether it's managing pipeline or whether it's managing updates or skills. I think there's a whole world of just making that back end more efficient and streamlined. I'm probably missing some stuff, but like those are just
Yeah.
two areas that come to mind.
And as we were talking, people are sort of typing
Oh,
on the Q&A. So, someone mentioned that they can see the use case in having a better one-on-one communication with their manager, right? And then there was another comment there as well that says
yeah,
it's a great way for people across the organization to actually feel heard, especially sort of at the end of the engagements, uh,
yeah,
the changes that result from. So this could be an effective sort of change management
oh yeah,
supplemental tool, right?
like
Which, by the way, directly hits on that third pillar of
yeah,
impact, measurement of impact.
yeah. I just think there's so much to be said for. I think there's so much to be said for being more inclusive. when it comes to any sort of transformation.
Yeah.
How can you get more people on board, give them some sort of say, demonstrate to them how they have been able to shape the high level strategy that usually comes from the ivory tower, and then play back exactly here. Thank you. As a result, here's the impact that not just
Yeah.
you, but us as a team have made as a result of doing this in a better way.
And one more thing, uh, and I don't know, but obviously the product is in development, in continuous development, as they all should be.
Yeah.
But one thing that just dawned on me, uh,
Yeah.
a lot of people are introverts, like I am.
Hmm.
I, not necessarily as comfortable sharing my views with an interviewer. I might
Yeah.
be more comfortable clicking on that link and doing
Yeah.
my conversation with that chat product Saturday morning over coffee, right? One thing
Yeah.
that this product also allows is, these interviews can be paused and stopped, can be continued on a laptop or a handheld device. So you as an interviewee, you providing the information, you can use it at your leisure. I think that actually is another side benefit of the model, right?
Yeah, big time. And that's where it's just having all channels open. Like
Yeah.
if you're managing your stakeholders, have face-to-face time with them so that you can, read between the lines, and then have the channel open so that, when they feel like it, they can just pick up the phone and they can supplement that. Like I think that's what it is. It's like capture as much as you can through as many channels as you can. And then one of the benefits of AI for all of the challenges that it has is it will do a good job of filtering through that and pulling out and understanding that and simplifying that so that you can
Yeah.
understand it as as someone who's driving the change.
Kevin, this was fantastic. Thank you. And one more thing that sort of came to my mind. Oh, look at this. Sabina is asking how the data collection is protected. Yep. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like it's a cloud solution. So like we host it on AWS, Amazon Web Services. Like that's fully secure. It's like let's call it like an enterprise level security. And then we do use like AI providers. So we use Microsoft Azure is our AI provider, and um, they have been the best in terms of like the guarantees that we're getting around that the data is not being shared, the data is not being used for training, the data is suitable for building an enterprise solution. So this is definitely very far away from like the let's call it the free version of ChatGPT that nobody should really put anything into.
Yep.
This is like fully enterprise solution, and we've got the controls around that.
Another question came about the data residency. Like, where is it?
Yeah,
Where is the data sitting?
yeah. So right now it's so look, right now we have like EU, what's called EU data residency. So like all our servers are in the EU, and over time we'll just have more locations. But it's perfectly
Yeah.
possible to use it out of the US.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
and actually, for those who've been following this series of conversations, I had a very interesting discussion about a month and so ago with Tehema, who are providing um, protected zones, um,
okay.
like protected zones between your internal IT systems and the external technology that's available. So that could actually be potentially part of the solution here, to have this
Yes, yeah, yeah,
enclave, data enclave
yeah. Mm.
that
Good idea.
ensures that data from your internal organization will not seep out, where you can potentially set up a tool like this to be used.
Oh,
Just as a side note. So for those who might be interested in that, there is a video on TechTonic Conversations with the founder and CEO of Tehema talking about that particular very, very useful technology that could be part of the solution for that explicit question: how do I protect my internal data from seeping out?
yeah,
Kevin, this was fantastic.
yeah.
I,
Really
I, I
enjoyed it.
I know that we are coming at time. We only reserved an hour for this, but I think that we could carry on, and hopefully, what I was thinking that at some point with the new video capabilities and avatar capabilities, perhaps there is an option to also express the questionnaire through
Yeah,
some cool
Virtual
avatar
Dalibar.
agents, so that people who would prefer to have a conversation with somebody who feels like a human, they can choose that option. Others
Yeah,
could just choose a direct option talking to the link, right?
yeah. Well, like technologies that, like, there's the technology is no longer, I guess, technology is no longer the blocker on this stuff. I think it's
Yeah.
just the figuring out the responsible use and the right ways and handling the data and everything like that.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get a virtual Dalibar up and running soon.
Excellent. So Kevin, thank you very much for this. This was excellent. Workstuff.ai is
Yeah,
the
and give
company.
me my email's Kevin at Workstuff.AI. So just hit me direct on an email. Anyone wants to have a chat, I'd love to talk. Or on
Awesome.
LinkedIn. You can find me.
Awesome. Congratulations on the idea and congratulations on the implementation of the idea. And I look forward to staying connected and seeing
Yeah,
how
definitely.
how far you actually take this,
Congratulations
Kevin.
on your own business and your own community here. It's been great to be a part of it. So
Wonderful.
yeah, let's we will talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin, and have a lovely Monday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.